Tonight on KGW News, an unusual request sends a local couple scrambling to help their son.
He just started talking about that he was going to be released and he had to get a device for his ankle.
KGW investigates the elaborate scam his parents nearly fell for. Plus,
these cuts, they're reckless, they're very ill thought out.
Why a just announced overhaul of the federal health department has Oregon nurses worried. And later,
got Sharp running down the left side, lobs it right there for a two-hand back.
The Blazers attempt to dethrone the Kings as Rip City works to snag a spot in the playoffs. Thanks for joining us. I'm David Mulco. We begin at 11 with a new round of federal job cuts under President Trump. This time, some 10,000 workers in the Department of Health and Human Services amidst a massive restructuring and the elimination of entire agencies. Catherine Cook's in the news. We're looking into the potential impacts on people in the Northwest. Catherine?
Well, David, tonight the Oregon Health Authority tells us that this will end $117 million in COVID-era grant funding a year before some of those grants were scheduled to end. That funding would have supported substance abuse treatment programs and vaccine preventable disease work, among many other things.
These cuts, they're reckless, they're very ill thought out.
Scott Palmer is angry over the latest round of federal cuts to Health and Human Services. As chief of staff for the Oregon Nurses Association, Palmer worries about his members, many of whom work in overcrowded emergency departments. And he worries about people across the state whose access to federally qualified health centers may be disrupted because of these cuts.
For example, free maternal care, right? Those folks won't have any place else to turn but the emergency rooms of their local hospitals. And those local hospitals are staffed by O&A members.
Health and Human Services oversees 13 agencies. That includes the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, and the National Institutes of Health. Cuts announced so far will reduce the department's workforce from 82,000 full-time employees to around 62,000. On X, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. defended the move.
The U.S. ranks last among 40 developed nations in terms of health, but we spend 2 to 3 times more per capita than those nations. As Secretary, I now understand why all this money is not improving our health. HHS is a sprawling bureaucracy.
Kennedy said HHS would consolidate the 28 divisions in its health department into 15, calling it the Administration for Healthy America.
We're keenly focused on paring away excess administrators while increasing the number of scientists and frontline health providers so that we can do a better job for the American people.
Unsurprisingly, these anti-vaxxers are slashing vaccine research and at the very same time dedicating resources to launch vaccine conspiracy investigations and resurrect debunked science.
On Thursday, Washington Senator Patty Murray slammed the Trump administration's latest cuts. She noted the nation's growing number of measles outbreaks and warned of other potential consequences the cuts may have on public health.
They are picking chaos, plague, and pandemonium. That may as well be their official policy because that is what is coming down the tracks if they don't change course.
O&A is calling on Oregon's congressional delegation to oppose these cuts, specifically Republican Cliff Bentz. Earlier this month, the congressman commented on Trump's sweeping cuts, saying, quote, "I'm just happy that somebody finally is stepping up and trying to get this out-of-control spending situation under control." David?
Catherine Cook in the newsroom tonight. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate your reporting there. Well, meanwhile, we are also tracking cuts that have impacted some food banks across the country. The U.S. Department of Agriculture now sunsetting some programs that locally provide millions of dollars that go to help people in need. Just one example here. The Oregon Food Bank telling us some 30 truckloads, nearly 1.5 million pounds of food set to be delivered during the spring have all been canceled.
That funding has been frozen, and it's unclear as to whether it will be resumed. So at this point, we kind of have to assume that it won't. That has been providing about 18% of our food that comes through this warehouse and goes out to all 21 regional food banks in Oregon and Southwest Washington.
The USDA, by the way, calling the move, quote, a return to long-term fiscally responsible initiatives. Well, speaking of the need for the basics, it is the final week to donate to the KGW Great Food Drive. We are quickly approaching our goal with enough donations to provide over 1 million meals. Remember, $10 can be stretched to 30 meals. It's easy to give at kgw.com/food drive. We want to thank local Toyota dealers, Pacific Office Automation, Rivermark Community Credit Union, and Safeway for helping make this year's food drive a huge success. And of course, our thanks to all of you. Okay, let's take you outside on this Thursday night, Friday Eve, with temperatures back to normal, so to speak, for early spring after some record-setting days. Celine Stevens in for Matt tonight with your first forecast. And Celine, the rain is back too.
Definitely, yeah. It actually started raining again around the past hour or so. Just sprinkles, but now it's starting to pick up just a bit. You'll see right now temperatures in the low 50s, 53 degrees. Those winds coming out of the south at 10 miles per hour. And take a look at our radar. Over the last couple of hours, again, that rain has started pushing in toward our area. Even seeing some lightning strikes off to the east and northeast of our area. Portland really not being affected by that. Also seeing snow, of course, in the mountains. And it looks like those lightning strikes near that Mount Hood area as well. And so this is going to continue as we get into the rest of our evening. Right now, temperatures, though, 50 in Aurora, like we said, 53 here, 52 in Vancouver, and lots of 50s on the map. Seeing some 40s, though, like along the coast, 48 degrees in Newport. And right now, temperatures definitely still a little bit cooler than this time yesterday. Earlier, it was a lot more drastic. We were seeing nearly a 20-degree temperature difference from today versus yesterday. Right now, we're only at 4 degrees cooler than this time yesterday. It looks like along the coast, 5 degrees cooler. And so we're going to be seeing that today we saw less than 1/10 of an inch of rainfall in our area, but this is going to continue. We're going to be looking at a bit more rain as we get into Friday and into the weekend. We'll talk about all that and more a bit later.
Still can't believe we hit 82 yesterday. Okay, thanks, Celine. New at 11, a bill going through the Oregon legislature would, in theory, make it easier for you to check the cost of medical procedures ahead of time. Senate Bill 1060 would require hospitals to publicly list standard charges for services, including negotiated rates with insurance companies. Hospitals that fail to comply could face thousands of dollars in civil penalties. Supporters say the bill would give patients more control over their health care costs. Opponents say it would create more administrative costs, open hospitals up to legal action, and add it's redundant with federal policies.
Senate Bill 1060 creates a right to bring certain lawsuits against hospitals. If a lawsuit is filed, the hospital will incur substantial costs to defend itself. Oregon's small and rural hospitals should not have to face this risk.
Although federal regulations require hospitals to make this information publicly available, enforcement has been insufficient. Patients deserve to understand the differences before they receive the care, not after.
Well, the Senate is expected to discuss this bill in its next work session, scheduled for Tuesday. To get you caught up on tonight's other headlines now, we have an update from police on a driver accused of hitting at least 3 cars in northeast Portland. This ended at Grand and Schuyler just after 4 this afternoon. Authorities tell us the suspect was hurt in the last crash and had to be taken to the hospital, but there are no reports of other injuries. The driver was given a ticket, while police now say it was his passenger who ran from the scene. Police were not able to find them. In Gresham, police have arrested a man who allegedly stabbed another to death overnight. This was after midnight near Northeast Gleason, just after 202nd. When officers responded, they say they found 53-year-old Thomas Farrer dead. Police detained William Huffman and say he stabbed Farrer and tried to attack another person. Huffman is charged with murder, attempted assault, and unlawful use of a weapon. And for the first time in Multnomah County, a person has pleaded guilty to using drugs on public transit. The new law went into effect at the beginning of the year and makes consuming illegal drugs on buses or trains a Class A misdemeanor. Today, a judge sentenced the man to 12 months probation after he admitted to using drugs on the streetcar. He'll also have to take a mandatory drug test, follow recommended treatment, and abide by any streetcar exclusions. Now to a KGW investigation and a story you will not see anywhere else about a Westland couple whose son was arrested and who nearly fell for an elaborate scheme. One apparently involving a scammer masquerading as law enforcement with just enough information to lure them in. Investigative reporter Evan Watson shows us how it all played out.
Hello, this is Lieutenant Phillips with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling to speak with Mr. Jeffrey Scheid.
A West Lynn couple received a phone call with an unusual request.
Emotionally, it's your son, and so you're wanting to help however you can.
A man claiming to be a Clackamas County Sheriff's Office lieutenant said their son was in jail and they could help.
He just started talking about that he was going to be released and that he had to get a device for his ankle.
Doubtful, the Shides ended the call, but their son has been arrested before. They decided to check it out, pulling up the Clackamas County jail roster online. What they found made them rethink everything. Their son had been arrested earlier that day for drug possession. The call now seemed much more credible.
Any opportunity that presents itself to help him, we are on board.
The caller wanted more than $2,000 to help pay for a monitoring device and outpatient treatment.
Well, I always consider us pretty savvy when it comes to this stuff. And the fact that we were kind of buying into it a bit.
Jeff Scheid asked if he would take any payment to the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. The caller said no, it's through a third party. Bring cash to this address, which turned out to be a nearby 7-Eleven.
And that's obviously red flags went off.
The Shides realized they had entertained a scam far longer than they thought they ever would. They reported it to law enforcement.
It was taking advantage of somebody who's really in a position of vulnerability.
The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office says they've received a few reports about this new type of scheme, targeting family members of people in custody.
I mean, they're going into detail, right, and doing their homework.
Public Information Officer Ross Clemson says there's one rule to remember.
Law enforcement agencies in general, no one will ever call you and ask you for money. It just doesn't happen.
The jail roster is publicly available, but you can only search by name, not date. Clemson doesn't know how someone knew to call the Shides on the day their son was arrested just hours later. Maybe it was luck, or maybe they used an AI tool. He says it's unfortunately creative. Jeff Scheid still thinks about it.
And I'd love to know how they got that information so fast. That's the mystery.
The Shides say the scammer used urgency to elicit an emotional response.
I think when they talked about the outpatient treatment being involved in the process, that was a real hook for me.
The more you think about it after the fact, the more implausible it is.
Clemson says it's difficult to track down scammers. They're often calling from another state or country. In this case, he said the sheriff's office would have loved the opportunity to intercept whoever was planning on taking the Shides' money at 7-Eleven if they'd been notified ahead of time. He reminds the community to call law enforcement directly and verify information when you're skeptical something might be a scam. Evan Watson, KGW News.